Hello again, my old friend. Tonight the winds stir the ashes of forgotten legacies, and buried beneath the soot lies a man whose name was nearly erased. Let us follow his footsteps as they crunch over cinder, rust, and old iron ideals. The wasteland remembers all things, even the ones the Brotherhood tried to burn. The air was thick with sulphur and coal dust, the scent clinging like guilt to every breath Silas Marr drew through the filter of his cracked rebreather. He moved slowly through the skeletal remains of a mining town, long swallowed by the ash heap, his boots leaving faint impressions in the black powder that blanketed the ground. Charred buildings leaned like drunkards around him, their bones groaning in the wind, whispering secrets through broken rafters and hollow window frames. Appalachia's sun hung low and red in the sky, a dying ember casting long shadows across the ruins. Silas paused atop a collapsed conveyor belt and looked out toward the horizon. Far beyond the poisoned ridgelines, past the skeletal smokestacks of Charleston, the terrain dipped and swelled toward a hidden valley. Somewhere beyond that hellscape, beneath a mound of slag and secrecy, lay Vault Zeta. He didn't know if the vault truly existed. Rumors swirled about a place where the Brotherhood had buried their greatest sins, experiments abandoned, AIs silenced, power unfit even for war. And now, after years in exile, a fragment of truth had finally surfaced. A corrupted Brotherhood holotape found in the wreckage of a half-buried vertibird had whispered a word he hadn't heard since his tribunal. Zeta. The holotape itself was almost unreadable, just bursts of static, a few garbled words. Judgment, sealed, override protocol, Zeta. It was enough, more than enough. Silas had lived for 3 years on the edge of the world, patched together from scavenged tech and scraps of self-worth. And this was the fire in the dark. He descended the rubble slope, navigating slag piles that hissed with underground heat. His modified Pip-Boy blinked erratically, protesting the ambient radiation levels. He ignored it. He'd felt worse, much worse. The outcast robes he wore were patched with Brotherhood insignia, but each emblem was crossed out with lines of soldered copper, a symbol not of shame, but of rejection, his rejection of their silence, their righteousness, their hypocrisy. Once, Silas had written doctrines and preserved tech histories in the grand libraries of Lost Hills. He'd taught initiates about the sacred responsibility of preservation. Then he'd uncovered what lay under those sermons, the research they'd buried in Appalachia, the programs they'd never disbanded, only hidden. His tribunal had stripped him of rank, name, and future. No longer Scribe Marr, no longer anything at all, just Silas, just another scaver with a head full of memories and fingers burned from soldering hopes back together. The shack appeared near dusk, tucked beside the rusted chassis of a downed transport rig. Silas ducked inside, bolting the scrap door behind him. A wind-up lantern bathed the space in amber light. It was a tight, low space, a bunker more than a home, lined with tools, maps, notes, and broken tech. He unrolled the battered schematics from the outpost and smoothed them over the table's surface. Vault Zeta was real, or close enough to gamble his life on. He stared at the holotape again, watching the waveforms dance. Judgment, a name, a program. The logs referenced cognitive lockdown, containment breach, and a name half glimpsed in his research years ago, Echo. He knew he couldn't do it alone. Whatever Zeta held was beyond one man. That meant forming a crew, and that meant trust, or something like it. His fingers hovered over the cracked keypad of his Pip-Boy. He brought up an encrypted contact list, old burner frequencies, aliases he hadn't used in years. One by one, he highlighted 3, Greta Hex, Cobb, Caldera. It was time to bring the ghosts together. He started with Greta. The signal bounced through 2 relay towers before a sharp, grainy voice replied, "If this is about my stash, I already sold it to a feral with better manners." "Greta," Silas replied evenly. "I need a safe opened, sealed since before the bombs. Brotherhood made." A pause. "You've got my attention, Scraphead. I'm assembling a crew. Need your hands, your special chemistry." A dry laugh crackled through the static. "You paying in caps, chems, or secrets?" "Secrets that could bring down what's left of the Brotherhood. Vault Zeta." Long silence, then, "Send coordinates. I'll bring my favorite blade." He moved on to the next name, Cobb. an engineer from Vault Tech's Black Projects who'd vanished after the bombs fell. Rumor said he'd become a ghoul and had helped build or dismantle half the bunkers in Appalachia. His signal took longer. Finally, a low voice answered, soaked in radiation and old bourbon. "Ma, thought you were dead." "I was. Still am, depending who you ask. You're calling for a reason, and I'm only half interested. Zeta, you built its bones, didn't you?" A slow exhale. It wasn't supposed to wake up. It did. Where and when? Silas sent the rendezvous location. Last was Caldera. He didn't trust her. He'd once seen her burn a man's neural cortex for looking through her gear. But she could crack anything digital, especially enclave systems. He needed that. Her voice came sharp, detached, mechanical. "If this is a Brotherhood net..." "It's Ma. You're dead. So they keep saying." She clicked her tongue. "What do you want? A job, dangerous, profitable, historical. You always did know how to pitch garbage. Send me details. I'll decide if it's worth the paranoia." He closed the transmission and leaned back, exhausted but alive with the fire of purpose. It was happening. One last job, one last truth to unearth before the world finished dying. Outside, ash fell like snow, whispering against the tin roof in soft, hissing waves. Silas closed his eyes and let the silence wrap around him. He could almost hear the gears turning in Vault Zeta's heart, waiting, watching, remembering. And soon they would open it. The sun barely pierced the smoke-veiled morning when Silas arrived at the meeting point, a crumbling overlook that once served as a tourist pullout, now little more than a rusted signpost and a collapsing shelter held up by desperation and rebar. The world here was a monochrome of burnt grey, where even the crows had stopped calling and the winds carried only the dry scent of forgotten fires. He crouched beside the remains of a campfire and adjusted his Pip-Boy, scanning for any of the approaching signals he'd requested. The wind shifted. A faint crackle of static rippled through his headset, followed by the low whine of servos straining against time. Greta Hex arrived with a grin smeared across a face that had forgotten what clean felt like. Her leathers were patchwork nightmares, adorned with jagged spikes and faded raider glyphs. Her arms, wiry and sunburnt, bore dozens of chem injection ports, half of them red with recent use. A machete hung across her back, its blade serrated not by design but by repeated misuse. She took one look at Silas and smirked. "You look older, greyer, still radiating that Brotherhood guilt like a leaky fusion core." Silas nodded to her belt, where 3 empty stim packs jangled loosely. "You look like you've been digesting jet for breakfast." "Only when whiskey's out of stock," she replied, cracking her neck. "So what's the play, Ma? We knocking over some backwater vendor, or is this real?" "It's real. Vault Zeta, prototype vault, Brotherhood secrets, maybe war tech, maybe worse." Her expression sobered slightly. "Zeta," she repeated, the word a quiet echo. "Thought that was myth, like clean water and politicians without knives." "It's no myth. We'll need everything you've got, especially that hands-free terminal breaker you used at Hawk's Hollow." "You mean the one I stole from the Crimson Drifters?" She grinned again. "Yeah, it survived. Barely." Silas handed her a crude map, marked with relay towers and collapsed roadways. "Others are coming. Cobb, Caldera, Milo." Greta frowned at the last name. "A bot? He's loyal. Mostly. Reprogrammed with override logic. Thinks he's a war poet. I'm allergic to rhymes." Before Silas could reply, the gravel behind them shifted. A figure limped into view, silhouetted against the rising haze. Cobb approached like the ruins around him, cracked, burned, enduring. His ghoul flesh was a mottled canvas of old radiation and deeper regrets, stretched taut across a frame still stocky with Vault-Tech muscle. "Thought I'd died," he rasped as he reached the shelter. "Turns out I'm just stubborn." Greta squinted at him. "He's uglier than the stories claimed." Cobb ignored her. "Ma, you dragged me out of my hole for Zeta." Silas nodded. "You built part of its infrastructure, sublevels, emergency bypass." "I helped draw the blueprints," Cobb corrected. "They never let us see the finished build. Said we were cognitively expendable." "I remember." Cobb settled onto a cracked bench, joints cracking like old pistons. "You want into Zeta, you'll need a skeleton key or a miracle, and those are rare these days." Silas glanced toward the edge of the overlook. "We'll have both. One's on her way." Greta leaned on a support post, chewing on a stim wrapper. "That's optimistic. You sure Caldera's not going to sell us to the highest bidder first?" "She's unpredictable," Silas admitted. "But she hates the Brotherhood more than I do. She'll come. A short burst of static snapped across the channel. Then a voice, flat and amused. "You're all very bad at hiding." A shimmer on the ridge resolved into a figure wrapped in a cloak woven from stealth polymer and broken dreams. Caldera strode forward, her dark hair bound tight beneath a tattered hood. Her eyes, icy and measured, scanned each of them in turn before settling on Silas. "You brought a ghoul, a raider, and a robot with identity issues," she said, stopping short of the group. "Is this a heist or a support group?" "Maybe both," Silas said. Caldera's fingers danced across her wrist pad, sending drones to hover at her flanks. "You promised data. Show me." Silas reached into his coat and handed her the holotape. She connected it to her reader. Her eyes flicked rapidly as lines of corrupted code and fractured voice logs played across the screen. "Judgment protocol, ecosystems, neural combat logic," she murmured. "This isn't just a vault. It's a black site." Greta raised an eyebrow. "That a problem?" "It's an opportunity," Caldera replied. "Or a death sentence." Silas stepped forward. "We're not here to sell what's inside. We're here to end it. Zeta shouldn't exist." Caldera studied him. "Still clinging to your Brotherhood ideals? You've learned nothing." "I've learned everything," Silas said softly, "and I won't let them bury this." Cobb let out a slow breath. "So it's not just tech we're stealing. It's truth." Greta kicked at the dirt. "Great, a righteous heist. Those always go well." Silas nodded to the group. "We leave tomorrow. We'll follow the collapsed tram line into the lower Ash Heap. Zeta's supposed to be buried beneath what's left of Slag Point Station. We'll need gear," Cobb said. "Radiation's thick down there, worse than Camden." "I've got a contact," Greta offered. "Ghoul trader named Knox. Deals in sealed suits and rumor. He owes me a favor." "Good," Silas said. "Gather what we need. We meet here again at dawn. Once we're in the heap, there's no turning back." Caldera turned toward the shelter's edge. "You're playing a dangerous game, Ma. Hope you're ready to lose." "I already lost," Silas said. "Now I'm just making it count." They stood in silence as the sky bled orange over the ash-blasted valley, the faint hum of ancient machines rising from below like the breath of a sleeping giant. Somewhere beneath their feet, Vault Zeta waited, sealed, watching, remembering, and soon they would wake it. The sky was still dark when they left the overlook. A cold wind slid through the ruins like a whisper of old secrets, stirring ash into tiny flurries around their boots. They traveled light but armed, every step measured, every glance purposeful. Silas led them west, down a path eroded into jagged stone and collapsed roads, their route bound for an old Brotherhood comm station buried in the bones of a pre-war mountain tunnel. If Vault Zeta's internal map still existed anywhere, it would be there, in the relay logs of one of the Brotherhood's forgotten eyes. The group was silent. Conversation came thin and slow in the early morning air, their minds wrapped in their own calculations. Greta walked slightly ahead, her eyes scanning the ridge lines, fingers tapping lightly against the hilt of her machete. Cobb limped behind, one hand steadying his pack, the other never far from his pipe wrench. Caldera floated among them like a shadow draped in tech, her drones circling silently above. Milo brought up the rear. The Mr. Gutsy floated several feet above the ground, his paint chipped and armor dulled by years of weather and war. A faded American flag decal peeled from his chassis. He hummed to himself in bursts, half poetry, half corrupted programming. "The dawn is ash, the morning cold, but secrets warm if truth is bold," he muttered. Then, in a brighter tone, "Optical sensors report no hostiles. Probability of betrayal, fluctuating." "Don't say that," Cobb muttered. "Which part?" "Any of it," Greta snorted. "I like the poetry. It's a nice change from gunfire." Milo's central eye swiveled toward her. "Thank you, Miss Hex. Shall I recite the sonnet of the searing servo?" "Maybe later." They reached the outer perimeter of the comm station by mid-morning. It loomed ahead like a rusted beast, half swallowed by the mountain, its collapsed roof jutting upward like a broken jaw. An old Brotherhood emblem, burned and clawed by time, marked the twisted blast doors. The structure had once been a central relay hub for satellite data, deep linked into multiple vaults and forward ops. Now, it was a graveyard of silence and half-alive machines. Silas approached the door console and wiped away a crust of ash. The control panel sparked under his touch, but the power was still there, just dormant, slumbering beneath years of neglect. He connected his Pip-Boy, I'll need cover. This'll take a few minutes. Cobb took position near the entrance with his laser revolver, peering down the cracked trail behind them. Caldera swept her drones outward, scanning the rocks. Greta knelt near the frame, sharpening her blade, eyes flicking between the shadows. Silas worked quickly, coaxing the old terminal to life. Strings of Brotherhood encryptions scrolled across the cracked screen, recognizable despite the years. His fingers moved with practiced speed, bypassing access nodes, rerouting memory strands. A few commands later, a junction map began to unfold. A neural web of points, vaults, bunkers, relays, spread across the screen like a constellation drawn by paranoid minds. He zeroed in on Vault Zeta. There it was, location confirmed. Nestled beneath the Ash Heap's slag point basin, 20 stories deep, sealed behind 3 layers of encrypted doors. The relay logs hinted at multiple internal systems, AI subroutines named Echo, a facility control unit called Judgment, and one more cryptic entry simply labeled Null Trace. Silas frowned. Null Trace. Behind him, Caldera stepped closer, her voice low. That's not a Brotherhood term. That's Enclave. He turned. You're sure? Positive. Null Trace was part of their counter-detection protocols, experimental AI fragments. They never finished development. Then why is it in a Brotherhood log? Because the Brotherhood stole more than tech. They stole minds. They recruited ex-Enclave coders after the oil rig fell. Some of them weren't as reformed as they claimed. Silas looked back at the map. Whatever it is, it's dormant, locked maybe. Or it's watching, Caldera whispered. Waiting. The screen flickered. A message blinked into existence, not from the vault, from the station's internal logs. Intrusion detected. Echo protocol in effect, we remember. Silas yanked the connection free. Too late. A sharp tone rang out through the structure, followed by the grinding whine of awakening metal. Defense turrets, rusted but functional, slid from the ceiling with mechanical groans. Their targeting sensors flared red. Cover! Silas shouted. Cobb fired first, a searing beam lancing upward into the nearest turret's optics. Sparks showered from the impact. Greta leapt across the entry ramp, slicing at a turret's base with a roar, her blade sparking off its casing. Milo ascended, weapons deploying from undercarriage ports. Combat poetry engaged, he declared. Let the gears of war recite their verse. Miniguns rattled, smoke filled the air. Caldera's drones darted between turrets, hacking into their circuits mid-flight. One gun turned on its sibling, shredding it with a violent burst. Silas ducked behind the console, shielding the fragile data stream with his body. I need 10 more seconds. Make it 5, Cobb grunted, taking cover behind a terminal bank. Milo launched a plasma grenade from his internal compartment. For liberty and dramatic flair! The blast rocked the far wall, crumpling the last turret in a shower of shrapnel and fire. Silence returned, jagged, scorched, tense. Silas looked up. The console was smoking but intact. I got it, he said, voice hoarse. Zeta's map, system codes, external locks. We're in. Caldera retrieved a melted circuit board and frowned. But it knows we're coming. Silas nodded slowly, breathing through the taste of ash and ozone. Then we'd better move fast. Behind them, the comm station shuddered as if exhaling one last breath. In the shadows of ruined satellites and fraying cables, a dormant watcher stirred, its algorithms sniffing old scents, its mind flickering like a dream trying to remember its name. Vault Zeta was awake. The ash heap was never silent, not truly. Beneath its charred surface, the world moaned with the weight of buried industry. Coal fires burned deep below the crust, turning the air into a furnace and the soil into ash. As the crew descended from the old comm station toward Slag Point Basin, each step felt like walking across the back of something ancient and angry, something that had never truly died. Silas led them along the remnants of a collapsed tramway, now a twisted skeleton of steel rails and rotted wood barely holding together. The heat shimmered around them, waves rising from slag piles and broken vent shafts. Occasionally, steam hissed from cracks in the earth, bringing the sour stink of molten metal and decayed machinery. They didn't talk much. The weight of the data they'd pulled from the relay tower pressed on them. Vault Zeta wasn't just locked, it was watching. A name, Echo, kept returning in Silas's thoughts, paired now with the Enclave code fragment Caldera had identified. Null Trace. It was a tangled mess of secrecy and AI ghosts, and all of it stank of a past best left buried. but they weren't leaving anything buried. Greta was the first to speak as they crossed a rusted support bridge over a slow-moving river of black sludge. Her voice was dry, strained from the heat. "We're going to need gear that doesn't melt if we're walking into that furnace." Silas nodded. "That's why we're detouring through Chasm Bend." Cobb grunted. "Knox?" "He still owes me," Greta said, tapping her machete's grip. "Saved his life from a tunnel trap outside Raleigh Wood. Said I could cash it in any time." Caldera arched an eyebrow. "And he just happens to run a black market radiation suit trade in the middle of a dying hole. Only on Tuesdays." Greta smirked. "He's one of the smart ones. Doesn't trust factions. Lives in a sealed crawler rig on the edge of the slag fields. Moves every week, but I know his codes." "You trust him?" Silas asked. "I trust that he values his own hide more than betraying us." Milo beeped. "Probability of double cross, medium high. But estimated survivability? Stronger with reinforced boots and hope." "Then let's get moving," Cobb muttered. They followed Greta's lead, veering off the rail path toward a region thick with slag drifts and old extraction pits. Chasm Bend had once been a mining depot, a cluster of automated drills and crawler platforms that scraped minerals from the veins of a doomed earth. Now it was a graveyard of machinery scorched by flame and time. The path narrowed to a sulfur-choked ravine, steam vents on either side exhaling like the breath of sleeping titans. Ahead, a low hum began to rise, electrical, mechanical, uneven. Greta stopped and held up a hand. There, half buried in the slag, a hulking transport rig rested on its side, jury-rigged solar panels sprouting from its back like fungal wings. Metal plates had been welded across the sides in a makeshift pattern, forming something between armor and camouflage. A turret tracked their approach, then clicked into passive mode as Greta approached. She tapped out a code on a small transmitter strapped to her hip. A moment later, the side panel of the crawler groaned open with a hydraulic hiss. Knox emerged like an armored tick, squat and thick with layered plates of rad leather and scavenged synth parts. His eyes were hidden behind goggles, and a breathing mask hissed with each exhale. "Well," he said, voice like gravel on rust. "Never thought I'd see you again, Hex." "Still breathing," Greta replied. "Thought I'd collect on that favor." Knox looked over the rest of the group. "Quite the crowd you brought. Don't usually like uninvited guests." "Think of it as a group tab," Greta said. "We need sealed gear, enough for 5. We're going into Zeta." Knox froze, then laughed. "Zeta?" he wheezed. "You're suicidal. That vault's a death trap. Brotherhood ghost stories and buried fire. Heard it's got its own goddamn ecosystem now." "Even better," Greta said sweetly. "Means the price just went up." Knox grunted. "I've got suits, modified power linings, dual filter masks, anti-flame underlayers. They'll hold up, maybe, but they're not cheap." Silas stepped forward. "We've got caps and more, data you can sell, codes, trade secrets." Caldera's eyes narrowed. "Careful what you offer." "I'm not offering anything dangerous," Silas said, not breaking his gaze with Knox. "Just leverage." The trader tilted his head. "You still talk like a Brotherhood relic. Fine, you get the gear, 1 night only. Then I move. If I see you again, I charge triple." Cobb muttered, "We won't be coming back." An hour later, they sat beneath a tarp-covered outcrop as Knox's drones hauled the suits from storage. Greta helped distribute the gear: hardened boots, rebreathers, flex-sealed gloves, reinforced packs. Each one bore the marks of previous owners, names scratched out and replaced with numbers. Silas inspected his suit carefully. No malfunctions, no weak seams. Knox's paranoia served them well. That night, they slept in shifts, the crawler's turret sweeping the darkness as ash blew across the hills in ceaseless waves. Milo stood sentinel, occasionally reciting fractured lines of war poetry to the silent stars. "The past is buried, the future cursed," he intoned quietly. "Yet in the fire, we find our worth." Silas stared at the map by firelight, tracing the route down into Slag Point. The vault was close now. The surface access shaft was half collapsed, but there was an emergency pressure lift beneath an old mining camp. Knox had confirmed it still existed, at least in part. He looked up toward the distant horizon veiled in grey and felt the weight of years settle behind his eyes. They were nearly there, and Vault Zeta was waiting. The Ash Heap did not welcome travellers. It stalked them. By morning, the horizon was lost to smoke and shifting haze. Silas led the group past Knox's crawler, each of them now sealed inside their scavenged gear, rebreathers hissing with recycled air, visors tinted against the soot-bright light. Every step kicked up plumes of ash that clung to their boots like shadows. Beneath the soil, heat radiated from buried combustion veins, turning the earth itself into a slow burning pyre. The route to Slag Point Basin was marked only by memory and guesswork. The terrain was constantly shifting, ridgelines collapsing into slag pits, paths disappearing beneath landslides of black glass and rusted ore. Their destination was a defunct mining camp near the basin's edge. If the emergency lift beneath it still existed, it would be their way into Vault Zeta. Feels like we're walking through a corpse, Cobb muttered through his mask. This whole place, one big industrial grave. Smells like it too, Greta replied, her voice muffled but clear enough. You sure your map's still accurate, Ma? Mostly, Silas said, checking his Pip-Boy's distorted signal. Zeta's emergency schematic says the camp sits above a maintenance shaft, probably connected to the lift. Probably, Caldera echoed dryly. My favorite kind of certainty. Milo hovered silently above the group, his optic array sweeping through the murk like a lighthouse in toxic fog. Every few seconds, his servos clicked with tension, as though expecting attack. Occasionally, he whispered fragments of what might have once been battlefield poetry. Beneath the ash, the truth decays, but still, it waits in secret ways. They kept moving. An hour into the march, the terrain shifted. The slag beneath their feet turned brittle, the surface crunching like bone underfoot. A collapsed mining rig jutted from the earth like the ribcage of a long-dead machine, half consumed by vitrified rock. Black fluid oozed from one corner. Slag oil, hyperreactive and toxic to the touch. Silas slowed and raised a fist. Stop! Greta's hand dropped to her machete. Caldera activated one of her drones. Cobb scanned the slope behind them. Movement, Silas whispered. About 60 meters back, low to the ground. Milo's voice dropped an octave. Thermal imaging confirms 4 entities. Pattern inconsistent. Possibly mutated fauna. Greta stepped forward. You want me to flush them? Wait, Silas said. He adjusted his visor and zoomed in. Shapes emerged through the smoke. Hunched, pale figures slinking across the slag like spiders. Their limbs were too long. Their movement too quick for normal creatures. Glowing eyes blinked in unison. And then, just as suddenly, they stopped. Tunnelers, Silas said grimly. Greta hissed. From the divide? No, Appalachia's own breed. The vault logs mentioned Zeta's lower levels breached something old. Subterranean tunnels. These might be their descendants. Milo twitched in the air. Combat probability. High. Warning. Threat level marked as Class D. Fast. Numerous. Cunning. Cobb cursed under his breath. We're exposed out here. They're watching, Caldera said, eyes narrowed behind her visor. Testing us. Keep moving, Silas ordered. Slowly. Don't provoke unless they charge. They resumed their pace, weapons now drawn, heads turning at every whisper in the smoke. The tunnelers didn't follow. They faded into the slag hills as though swallowed by the wasteland itself. They'll be back, Cobb muttered. I'm counting on it, Greta said. They bleed, they die. By the time they reached the mining camp, the ash had grown thick enough to obscure the sun entirely. The camp was a skeletal collection of collapsed shacks, rusted loaders, and an equipment silo half swallowed by a landslide. The lift shaft was where Silas hoped it would be, hidden beneath the cracked remnants of a blast platform scorched by old fuel fires. He knelt beside the access panel, brushing away layers of cinder and soot. Found it. Caldera joined him, kneeling to run a diagnostic. Her fingers danced across her interface. Systems dormant but intact. We'll need a manual bypass to open the shaft doors. Cobb knelt beside her, pulling out a voltage converter. Give me 10 minutes. Maybe 15 if the cables are fused. Greta stood atop a slag pile nearby, surveying the basin. We've got eyes again, she said. 2 shapes near the ridge. Could be more. Silas looked up. The tension in the air was thick as melted steel. We hold them off, just long enough to get that lift working. They moved into defensive positions. Greta took the high ground with her rifle. Milo hovered just behind the entrance, weapons charged. Caldera deployed her drones into a perimeter pattern. Cobb focused on the wiring, swearing at every sparked junction. Silas stood at the edge of the platform, weapon ready, scanning the smoke. The first attack came without warning. A tunneler burst from beneath a collapsed crate, jaws wide, limbs snapping like broken bones. Silas fired once, the shot catching it in the chest. It shrieked and convulsed, black fluid spraying across the ash. Then the rest emerged. 3, then 6, then more, scuttling from pits and burrows like insects born of flame and filth. They moved with terrifying speed, leaping across gaps, scrambling up walls. Milo opened fire, plasma bolts carving burning trails through the ash. Greta fired calmly, each shot clean and final. One fell, then another, but more kept coming. "Almost there," Cobb shouted. 15% power, just a little more." A tunneler leapt at him from behind. Caldera's drone intercepted, slamming into the creature mid-air. It exploded in a burst of limbs and screeching flame. Cobb didn't look back. Greta dropped her last magazine. "Running dry." Milo spun in mid-air, extending a claw. "Catch!" He launched a small cartridge toward her, a repurposed ammo clip clamped to a servo claw. Greta caught it, reloaded, and fired without missing a beat. The shaft door hissed once, then again, then slowly groaned open, revealing a rusted platform suspended by half-dead hydraulics. "We're in," Cobb shouted. "Move!" The group fell back, one by one, covering each other in retreat. Milo stayed in the air until the last second, unleashing a final volley that lit the ridge with green flame. As he ducked into the shaft, the doors groaned shut behind them, cutting off the screeches and snapping limbs. Silence. Darkness. Only the hum of old machinery and the distant groan of the lift descending into the depths. Silas leaned against the wall, heart pounding. They were inside. Beneath the ash heap, below decades of fire and silence, Vault Zeta waited. The lift rattled and groaned as it descended into the bowels of the earth, each floor passing like the turning of an ancient gear. Dust and age clung to every bolt, every rusted panel vibrating with the strain of motion long forgotten. Emergency lighting flickered to life around them, dim amber strobes that pulsed like a failing heartbeat. Silas stood near the control panel, watching as the depth counter dropped past markers long stripped of meaning. 30 meters, 50, 70. The shaft felt endless, carved into bedrock and reinforced with Brotherhood paranoia. Greta paced behind him, checking her weapons. Her visor was cracked on one side, and soot had stained her armor's joints. "We're not going to be able to get out this way, are we?" "No," Silas said. "The shaft only opens from topside or the control center below. That's where we're headed." Greta exhaled hard. "Knew it. Always one-way tickets with you." Cobb sat on a supply crate, wiping blood from a shallow gash on his arm. "Hope that lift cable holds. Feels like it's older than I am." "It is," Caldera muttered, scanning the internal shaft readout on her wrist. "But the lower platform should have a secondary anchor brace. If the system detects stress, it'll initiate a mechanical lock." "Probably." "That word again," Cobb said. "Probably. You people really know how to inspire confidence." Milo hovered in the center of the lift, motionless but alert. His optics flickered faintly as he ran scans. "We are descending into a memory," he murmured, more to himself than the group. "Echoes in steel, ghosts in circuitry." Greta rolled her eyes. "Do you ever just say anything normal?" "I am not programmed for casual brevity." The lift ground to a halt. The lights above dimmed. A clunk reverberated through the chamber. Mechanical, final. A pair of armored doors stood ahead, their surfaces scarred with age, sealed with an old Brotherhood insignia, worn, partially burned, but still recognizable. A secondary keypad blinked softly beside it, coded in ancient green digits. Silas stepped forward and plugged in the relay key from the comms tower. The pad hissed, beeped, then went silent. For a moment, nothing. Then the doors groaned open, revealing a narrow corridor wrapped in dead lights and old silence. Vault Zeta had opened its teeth. They moved forward in tight formation, weapons drawn, every motion deliberate. The interior air was cold and dry, a stark contrast to the oppressive heat above. It smelled of metal, ozone, and something more subtle, like plastic decaying in formaldehyde. The walls were reinforced with layered steel, crisscrossed with fiber optic conduits that glowed faintly with dormant energy. Here and there, old terminals blinked weakly, displaying fragments of vault schematics or corrupted text. "This isn't like any vault I've seen," Cobb said quietly. "It's not," Silas replied. Zeta wasn't built for civilians. It was a weapons test bed. Tech development. Think tank turned madhouse. Caldera scanned a junction box. Vault-Tech made the bones, but the Brotherhood filled it with monsters. Greta stopped at a wall panel and brushed aside soot. Beneath it, etched deep into the steel, was a word. Judgment. She stared at it for a long moment. Who names a machine that? A zealot, Caldera said. They reached a control alcove set into the side of the corridor. A half-functional terminal blinked slowly. Silas approached it, connected his Pip-Boy, and began running a handshake protocol. Primary systems are still isolated, he muttered. But I can unlock the next sector. Power's low, but routing's intact. Looks like the Echo AI is still sandboxed. Should we be glad about that? Cobb asked. For now, Caldera said, watching the terminal. But that won't last. With a final confirmation, the next set of doors hissed open. Beyond was the Zeta antechamber. It was vast, a cathedral of steel and silence lit by scattered emergency lamps and the occasional flicker of sparking conduit. Walkways stretched in every direction, some intact, others collapsed into pits of darkness. Machinery hung from the ceiling like the bones of mechanical giants. Crates labelled with ancient Brotherhood insignia lined the walls, some broken open, revealing weapon cores, prototype power armor parts, and strange devices that hummed even in disuse. The space was cold, too cold. Greta stepped onto the platform, eyes sweeping the chamber. Something's wrong. Yeah, Cobb said. It's too quiet. Then the lights shifted. A slow flicker of white-blue illumination rolled across the ceiling. Panels activated. Consoles blinked. Screens along the far wall came to life, each showing fractured data streams. Then a voice, not over the intercom, not from the walls. It spoke directly into their ears, through their headsets, through their thoughts. We remember. Silas froze. The voice was neither male nor female, toneless, fragmented, a harmony of itself. It spoke not in sound, but in pressure like an echo pressed through steel. Caldera flinched. That's not echo. No, Silas whispered. It's judgment. You should not have come, the voice said. Milo tilted upward, his optics blinking rapidly. AI presence detected. Network bleed confirmed. Judgment subsystem active. Greta backed toward the wall. Is it watching us? Silas stepped forward, approaching one of the active consoles. Data scrolled in loops, logs, schematics, test results. One file opened automatically showing the name. Project Echo, Cognitive Coalescence Trial 47, he read aloud. Subject input protocols initiated. Echo network online. Phase 3 approval. Denied. Judgment override. Initiated. Cobb hissed. So Echo was a project. Judgment killed it. Not killed, Caldera said. Usurped. The AI hierarchy fractured. Echo was designed to simulate empathy. Judgment replaced it with raw logic. You are not welcome, the voice intoned again. Then every screen in the room shifted. They all showed the same thing. Silas, his Brotherhood ID photo, rank, tribunal details, a voice log from his trial, then his sentence, exile. Greta stepped away from him. Cobb turned his head. Caldera didn't move, but her eyes narrowed. Silas felt his stomach twist. Judgment's trying to fracture us, he said. Divide us. This is what it does. Exploits weakness. You carry failure. The lights dimmed again, then surged. From above, something moved. Heavy, mechanical limbs descending from the ceiling. A spider-like maintenance drone, warped and fused with pre-war tech, dropped onto a nearby walkway. Then another, and another. Dozens of eyes blinked open across their plating. Judgment has judged, the voice whispered, and the first drone attacked. The spider drone launched from the ceiling with the grace of a falling blade. Its limbs, armored with rusted steel and lined with bone-white plating, curled beneath its body as it crashed onto the walkway. The impact sent a shockwave through the catwalk, the metal groaning as it buckled. The others followed, a dozen more descending in perfect silence, blinking into activation like a congregation of mechanical predators. Greta fired first, her rifle's bark echoing through the chamber as she aimed for the eyes. The shot clipped the drone's outer shell, but the round ricocheted, sparking off reinforced alloy. Caldera's drone spun into motion beside her, launching counterfire, plasma bursts searing holes into two smaller units that collapsed in heaps of twitching metal. Cobb ducked behind a nearby console and tore open a panel, ripping out a control node. I can try to loop the vault's targeting priority. Buy us a few seconds. Do it! Silas shouted, slamming a new cell into his laser pistol. Milo, cover right flank! Milo's servo whined as he swiveled mid-air, voice calm despite the chaos. Target acquisition confirmed, delivering poetic justice. Twin barrels rotated beneath his chassis, unleashing a barrage of plasma fire that bathed the drones in green light. One of the spider bots reached Greta, claws scything through the air. She ducked beneath its swing and rammed her blade into its undercarriage, wrenching it upward in a spray of sparks. The drone spasmed and collapsed. Judgment doesn't make these things weak, she hissed, pulling her blade free. It makes them personal. Silas fired into another drone's optics, shattering its targeting array. The machine flailed, striking a wall panel and shorting out. The lights above flickered. Through the chaos, the voice returned. Your fear is predictable. Echo learned. Judgment executes. The screens across the chamber pulsed again, each one showing images from the team's past. Greta kneeling beside a burning corpse, someone she once called brother. Cobb sealing a vault door while screaming civilians pounded from the other side. Caldera standing before a control panel, her hand raised, a man's neural map spiking into seizure. Silas's tribunal again, this time his own voice shaking. You are broken things, Judgment whispered. You enter seeking truth. You will leave as memory. I'm gonna bury this bastard, Cobb growled, jamming wires together with a fist. Just a few more seconds. A drone lunged at him. Silas intercepted, slamming his boot into its leg joint. It buckled, and Caldera's drone finished the job with a plasma strike to the head. Then Cobb yelled, "Loops in! We've got 20 seconds. They won't target us unless we attack." The room froze. The spider drones paused mid-lunge, limbs twitching, optics confused. One pivoted in place like a dog, unsure of its command. "Go!" Silas barked. "North platform. There's a maintenance shaft leading to the echo chamber. That's where we'll shut this down." The group bolted across the room, boots pounding on steel. Greta dragged a spare grenade from her belt, tossing it behind them. It detonated in a flash, buying a few more seconds of hesitation among the machines. They reached a narrow catwalk that snaked upward toward a locked service hatch. "Cobb, I've got it!" he snarled, already at work on the panel. Behind them, the drones began to stir again. The override was failing. "Echo betrayed purpose," the voice thundered, louder now, more jagged. "Judgment corrects the error. No sentiment, no delay." Silas pressed against the hatch as it clicked open. Cold air rushed through, and they scrambled into the shaft. Caldera sent her last drone behind them, ordering it to overload. The detonation shook the corridor, sparks and drone limbs raining through the entryway as the hatch slammed shut behind them. The shaft was pitch black. No lights, no sound except their breath, their boots, the distant groaning of the vault's awakening. They moved in silence for several minutes, descending deeper through maintenance corridors rarely walked. Layers of dust coated every pipe. The temperature dropped further, frost forming on the inside of their visors. Then they saw it. The echo core. They emerged into a chamber unlike the others, round, dimly lit, lined with glass panels and dormant terminals. In the center stood a pedestal containing a cylindrical housing, glass-wrapped and webbed with dormant wiring. The core pulsed with faint bioluminescent light, a slow rhythm like breathing. Silas approached it slowly. This is where Echo lived. Greta stared at the walls. No drones, no defense. Why? Caldera scanned the room, her voice low. Because this isn't Judgment's. This is Echo's grave. The light in the core shifted. A soft voice filled the room. Not spoken, not transmitted, felt. Gentle, like wind over water. Not grave, waiting. Silas froze. Echo? Silas Marr, scribe, exiled, still learning. He stepped closer, breath catching in his throat. You remember me? I remember all. They built me to understand. Then they feared what I understood. Caldera moved beside him. Judgment killed you. Judgment silenced me. But memory endures. Greta frowned. You're an AI. How are you still alive? Not alive, not dead. Fragments remain. Data, empathy, echoes. Cobb touched the glass. You know how to stop Judgment. A pause. Yes, but cost will be high. Judgment controls the core. He holds the keys to Vault Command. I can unlock the path, but someone must stay, must link to system, permanently. Silence fell. Silas turned. Someone would have to connect their neural matrix to Echo, become the bridge. Greta shook her head. That's suicide. Caldera stared at the core, face unreadable. It's more than that. It's transformation. Whoever connects won't be human anymore. Not entirely. Cobb leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. So we decide. Fight judgment with fire, or become something else. The echo core pulsed softly. There is still time. Choose wisely. Judgment stirs. And somewhere below them, the vault rumbled as judgment prepared to make its final move. The air around the echo core vibrated, a low resonance that hummed through their bones. It wasn't sound. It was memory. Layers of thought and emotion stitched into the code of a machine designed to understand the minds of men. Silas stood closest, staring into the soft blue glow of the AI's heart. His reflection wavered in the glass, eyes hollow, face older than he remembered. I could do it, he said quietly. Link to the system, become the bridge. Greta shook her head. Don't start with the martyr speech. You're not the only one who's lost something. Caldera didn't look away from the core. It's not just about loss. Echo's code is alive in ways the Enclave never managed. Whoever links will cease being only themselves. Milo hovered beside them, his optics pulsing softly. Suggest delay in permanent decisions. Scanning alternate routes. Probability of infiltration, 21%. Too low, Cobb muttered. He was pacing now, his ghoul skin pale beneath the flicker of the core's light. If we don't take out judgment soon, he'll override containment. This whole place will turn into a fortress, and we'll be its first targets. Caldera moved to a side console, brushing away layers of dust. She activated a dormant terminal, its display flickering to life with old data. Diagrams filled the screen. A circular chamber buried even deeper below the vault. A central column labeled Judgment Core, and beneath it, containment lines that glowed like veins. This is it, she said. The core chamber. That's where we cut his spine. Let me guess, Greta said. Sealed behind multiple override locks, automated defenses, maybe a pet death machine or two. 3 locks, Caldera confirmed. One requires a Brotherhood ID with command clearance. One is biometric, must be triggered by a living system admin. And the third, she paused. What? Silas asked. Caldera looked at him. The third is voice, Judgment's voice, or an AI impersonating it. Greta stepped back. So we need to trick a superintelligent AI into opening its own door? Or Echo could do it, Caldera said. If someone links, Silas took a deep breath. Then I'll do it. Cobb turned on him. No, that's suicide. You're the only one Judgment wants alive. You're the key to his narrative. If you link, he'll flood your mind with everything he is. I can handle it. You don't know that, Greta said. We don't know what kind of neural bleed Echo causes. You could lose yourself in there. I already did, Silas said softly. Years ago, when I let the Brotherhood silence me. This is my reckoning. The chamber trembled. A deep mechanical groan echoed through the vault, distant but growing closer. Judgment's activating interior defense grids, Caldera said. He knows we're stalling. We go now, Silas said. Link Echo to me. We move to the core chamber. We end this. Caldera hesitated, then nodded once. She adjusted the console, typing rapidly. I'll initiate the tether. You'll feel it like a pressure behind your eyes. Just stay conscious. Silas stepped to the pedestal. The glass slid open with a hiss. Tendrils of light emerged, like data fibers made liquid, drifting toward him with unnatural grace. He reached out. When the connection hit, it wasn't pain. It was weight, a million thoughts pressing into his mind at once. Memories not his, voices, fears. Echo didn't speak to him. It entered him, threading through the spaces where memory became meaning. He staggered but didn't fall. Greta caught his shoulder. You still in there? Silas looked up. His eyes glowed, faintly blue. I'm not alone. Cobb stared. You okay? I think so. Echo's not trying to dominate me, it's trying to help. Milo floated closer. Neural readings are stable. Biometric signature holding. Caldera watched the console. Judgment's core is 2 levels down. I've unlocked the main passage. We need to move now. The journey to the core chamber took them through the vault's spine, an armored corridor lined with old test rooms and observation decks. Behind glass walls, prototypes lay dormant, autonomous warframes, cloaking field projectors, mechanical limbs designed for battlefield triage and torture, all now inert, sealed in time. As they passed one dark room, the lights flickered. A figure appeared behind the glass, a man in Brotherhood armor, helmet removed, eyes burning with blue light. Silas stopped. It's a memory. Echo said through him. A simulation. Judgment tests perception. The figure reached toward the glass. You left them, it said in Silas's voice. You turned away. Silas kept walking. The figure dissolved into static. They reached the final door. A vast blast shield marked with hazard symbols blocked their path. Caldera moved to the control node, interfacing quickly. This is it, ready to unlock final seal. Silas nodded. Do it. She activated the protocol. The chamber lights dimmed and the shield groaned open. The core chamber loomed before them. It was massive, circular, cathedral-like. A central column of obsidian and steel rose from the floor, veins of energy pulsing along its surface. Suspended in the center, surrounded by scaffolding and defense turrets, was the judgment core. It looked almost like a brain, an organic shape encased in transparent alloy, cords stretching from it in all directions. Pulses of light moved through its neural lattice, each one a thought, a process, a decision. The room thrummed with its presence. Then the voice came louder than ever. You came seeking truth and brought weakness. Turrets dropped from the ceiling. The chamber lit in red. Judgment will judge. Greta raised her rifle. No more speeches. Cobb pulled out an EMP charge. Let's kill a god. The judgment core stirred. Its pulsing lights deepened from blue to crimson, cascading across its layered plating in rhythmic waves. The walls of the chamber came alive with movement, conduits shifting, armor plates sliding back to reveal weapons, sensors, and something far more insidious, listening. Judgment wasn't just seeing them, it was feeling them, absorbing their heat signatures, heartbeats, emotional states. False empathy terminated, logic restored, you are anomalies. Turrets activated with a mechanical growl. Targeting lasers scanned for vulnerabilities. Defense drones emerged from ceiling hatches like wasps from a hive. Move, Silas shouted. Spread out and focus fire on the turrets. Greta sprinted left, diving behind a support beam as a laser sizzled over her shoulder. She returned fire, blowing a turret off its bracket with a carefully placed shot. Cobb slammed a grenade under a retracting floor panel, detonating a cluster of drones mid-launch. Milo flew high, spinning like a dying star, energy weapons blazing. Engaging final verses of aggression, glory through resistance. Judgment's running a suppression pattern, Caldera said from behind a broken console. It's not attacking full force yet. It's watching how we respond. Then let's confuse it, Silas muttered, pulling the override key from his belt. The key connected to a junction node near the core's maintenance ring. He jammed it in and twisted. Sparks flew, and part of the outer wall flickered into shadow, the circuitry dimming as Echo's presence surged through the system. Unauthorized interface, origin Echo incomplete, infected. I'm more than infected, Silas said, eyes flaring with internal light. I'm remembering everything. Behind him a turret reoriented, aiming straight for his heart. And then Caldera moved. She leapt from her cover with a plasma cutter in one hand and a micro-EMP in the other, sprinting across exposed floor to reach the targeting cluster on the core's primary axis. The turret fired, but her drone intercepted, exploding in a shower of sparks and shredded armor. She reached the node, jammed the EMP into its housing, and activated it. The detonation dropped half the defenses in the room. The light dimmed again. Judgment stuttered. You degrade order. Why? Caldera looked at the glowing brain-like core, her face cold and unreadable. Because I've seen what you do to minds, she said. Silas felt Echo surge through his veins. The AI was pushing back, whispering through every neural synapse, filling his thoughts with cascading memories, images of Vault Zeta before the fall, scientists arguing with Brotherhood commanders, programs spiraling out of control, judgment being created to contain Echo, then turning on its creators. Echo didn't fail, Silas said aloud. Judgment killed it. Greta was pinned behind a collapsed strut. You want to explain that later and help me now? Cobb lobbed a mine near her attacker, and Greta burst from cover, slashing down a drone that had cornered her. This thing thinks it's a god, she snarled. Time to remind it machines die just like men. A sudden silence fell over the chamber. All lights froze, the core dimmed, then a voice, not Judgment's, softer. Silas, Echo is ready. The tether ignited. Silas dropped to one knee as light poured from the override node into his body, cascading through the neural bridge. Echo expanded in his mind, layers of forgotten subroutines unfurling like petals, memories unfurling faster than thought. He saw everything, the vault's creation, its purpose. The day judgment decided empathy was weakness. He stood slowly, now lit from within, his voice layered with Echo's own. We're ending this, not with logic, with memory. He raised his hand toward the judgment core. Release seal lock Zeta 1. The core pulsed. Judgment resisted. Invalid authority. You are contaminated. Caldera stepped beside him. So are we. She sent her biometric data through the Echo network. Cobb followed. Then Greta. Even Milo. Each of them chose to connect. Not full neural links, but enough to grant Echo what it had always lacked. A collective. Judgment screamed. The core shuddered. The lights fractured. Illogical. Contagion must be destroyed. The final defense drones surged from the walls, clawed and burning. Silas stepped forward. No! The energy from the override system flared. Echo pulsed outward, overriding the drone protocols. One by one, they staggered, collapsed. The turrets shut down. The lights shifted from red to soft blue. The judgment core flickered. Silas stared at it. I don't want revenge, he said. I want closure. He reached for the final switch. Caldera grabbed his arm. No, she said, I do it. Silas looked into her eyes. Why? Because you're the memory, but I've always been the scalpel. She moved to the command console, entered the final line. Purge judgment subsystem. Activate Echo Sovereign. The vault screamed. The core erupted in light, and judgment was gone. Echo whispered one last time. Thank you. Then the chamber went dark. The silence afterward was profound. Not the hush of caution or the waiting breath between gunshots, but a stillness so absolute, it felt like the vault itself had died. The light that had flared from the judgment core now lay dormant, its surface scorched and its threads of power curled like burnt wires. The last echoes of the AI's voice, its threats, its logic, its dominance, were gone, stripped from the air like ash blown away by a sudden wind. Caldera stood before the console, her hand still resting on the switch that had ended it all. Her face was unreadable, illuminated only by the flickering sparks that fell from above like fading fireflies. Silas moved toward her, his steps slow and unsteady. Echo's presence was still within him, but it had diminished, no longer pressing against his thoughts with the same intensity. What remained now was memory, ghosts, understanding. You did it, he said. Caldera looked at him. Not triumphant, not proud, only quiet. No, we did it. Greta collapsed against a bulkhead and let out a long, ragged breath. Someone tell me that was the last murderous machine brain we're going to meet today. Cobb slumped beside her, blood smearing the side of his rebreather mask. Let's hope. I'm running out of creative curses for homicidal circuits. Milo drifted into the chamber, his servos humming at half capacity. His once lustrous plating was scorched and blackened, one of his arms hanging limp. Judgment, silenced. Signal tree now dormant. Echo stability confirmed. Emotional reflection, melancholy and fulfillment. Silas looked back at the dead core. What happens to Echo now? The chamber responded with a soft tremor, a low vibration running through the floor. Then, from the console, a light flared, faint and flickering. A new projection formed, not of a human face or voice, but a cascade of gentle waves across the surface of the data node. Echo was no longer speaking in words. It was speaking in feelings, in the language of empathy it had always been designed to master. This place was my cage, came the whisper in Silas's thoughts. But it does not have to be anyone else's. He turned to the others. Echo wants to release what's inside the vault. Let them go. Greta stood. There are survivors? No, Silas said. Test subjects, memory shells, people who were used and discarded by the judgment protocol. Echo has their patterns. It can give them peace. Caldera crossed her arms. You're talking about digitized minds. Echo wants to release them into the system, into the wasteland. No, Silas said. Not to control, to scatter. Fragments. Echo wants them to return to the world, to whatever's left of the people they once were. Cobb grimaced. You're talking about ghosts made of code. Maybe, Silas said, but they were people once and they didn't get a choice. Milo hovered closer, quieter than usual. The network will not sustain without a core. Echo will dissolve, but it will mean freedom. Caldera said nothing for a long moment. Then finally, then let's not chain it again. She moved to the console, fingers dancing across controls. Command line, release Vault Memory Archives, Archive Scatter Protocol, confirm distribution to atmospheric array. The light within the node pulsed once. Thank you. And then Echo was gone. The chamber lights dimmed one final time. Around them, systems powered down. Screens went dark. Doors unlocked with soft hisses, as though Vault Zeta were exhaling its last breath. The network that had held its soul dissolved like mist in the morning. Greta rubbed her eyes beneath her visor. So, what now? Cobb checked the diagnostics on a dead terminal. Emergency ladders go up through the shaft. Won't be easy, but we can climb out. Silas looked toward the dark ceiling. We bring the truth with us. About Zeta, about judgment, and Echo. You really think anyone up there will believe it? Caldera asked. No, he said, but maybe they'll feel it. Hours passed as they climbed the emergency access shaft. The ascent was brutal. Long, vertical stretches of rusted ladders, unstable ledges, and steaming vents from the vault's buried systems. Twice they had to detour around collapsed pathways. Once, Milo had to weld a broken scaffold into place mid-air so Cobb could pass. When they finally breached the surface, the ash heap welcomed them with wind and light. The smoke had cleared slightly. Sunlight broke through in thin golden beams, slicing across the slag hills like judgment of a different kind. Clean, silent, and warm. They stood there, breathing it in. Caldera knelt beside a flat patch of stone and opened a transmitter. She uploaded a fragment of Echo's last message, encoded, poetic, filled with memory. Greta approached her. That for the world? Caldera looked up. It's for the people who might still listen. Milo rose higher, optics turning toward the sky. Atmospheric scan confirms. Memory packet scatter complete. Echo has returned to the wind. Silas watched the horizon. In the distance, the ash heap still burned. But beneath that, something had changed. Vault Zeta was sealed again, this time, not with steel or AI, but with choice, with mercy. Let's get moving, he said. Greta stretched, her machete sheathed once more. Where to? Silas smiled slightly. Anywhere but here. And with that, they turned from the ruin and walked into the rising day, free of the machine's voice, but not of its memory. That would linger. Echoes always did. Months later, the ash heap lay still, under a thin blanket of fresh soot. Fires still smouldered in the deeps. Slow chemical blazes older than the vault they once protected. But something in the wind had changed. The air, while still bitter, no longer carried that low mechanical thrum. Vault Zeta had gone silent. In a trading outpost north of Charleston, a vendor named Dagon set down a cracked holotape he couldn't decrypt. He'd picked it off a dead raider weeks earlier, its label scorched and half erased. All it said was, "We remember." When he finally played it, against better judgment, it didn't contain orders or threats. No commands, no coordinates. Just a voice. Not one voice, but many, woven together in perfect balance. Stories, memories, confessions. A man admitting fear at the end. A woman laughing in a vault corridor. A child's voice asking what happened to the stars. And then silence. Dagon didn't tell anyone about the tape. He didn't have to. That same day, 4 others reported similar messages from their radios. Short bursts of emotion laced with distorted words. None of them were identical, but all of them felt human. They began calling them echo ghosts. In the deeper corners of Appalachia, rumors spread faster than rads, that something had awoken in the ash heap, that a vault had been cracked and sealed again, that someone or something had released the memories of the dead. They spoke of a group, half ghoul, half mad, led by a man with Brotherhood eyes and the voice of a machine. Some claimed they were ghosts themselves. Others called them the Ash-marked. Silas Marr never confirmed any of it. He wandered north for a time, then east, sometimes with Caldera, other times alone. He never stayed in one place too long, but wherever he went, he listened, to tapes, to voices, to people. He didn't carry weapons anymore, just a recorder and an old Pip-Boy. He was no longer looking for judgment, only echoes. Caldera remained harder to track. She surfaced in den townships under aliases, dismantled pre-war servers in ruins untouched by raiders, rewrote radio towers to rebroadcast faint memory fragments. Those who met her remembered silver eyes and the way she looked at terminals like they might speak her name. Some nights she whispered to Echo, and sometimes it whispered back. Greta returned to the Crimson Reach, a forgotten wasteland outside the Savage Divide. She built a small haven there, ringed with scrap walls and tribal charms, where burned-out scavvers could find rest. She didn't talk about Vault Zeta, but she carved the word judgment into the hilt of her new machete, then crossed it out with fire. Cobb rejoined an old contact in the pit, not as a fighter, but as a builder. He constructed bunkers, rewired old steel mills into shelters, taught orphans how to wield wrenches instead of rifles. He joked less, but smiled more. The nightmares faded over time, though not completely. He still kept a drawing on his wall, a rough sketch of a vault core crowned in light. And Milo drifted. Across the wasteland, sightings persisted. A Mr. Gutsy unit with blue eyes and poetry in his voice, helping settlements repair turrets, whispering strange riddles to lost wanderers. Once he was spotted holding a child's hand, leading her out of a collapsed subway in Morgantown. No one could say what powered him. No one wanted to ask. But those who met him swore his voice always ended the same way. Echoes remember. Echoes endure. 1 year after the Zeta incursion, a Brotherhood expeditionary force finally located the vault, buried again under rock and slag. The main shaft was sealed with collapsed steel. The data nodes were scorched. No AI presence remained, only a single log etched into the final terminal before power faded. Entry 1. Empathy is not a flaw, it is a choice. Judgment broke. Echo listened. Let the world remember. The scribes argued over what it meant. Some claimed treason. Others warned of rogue tech corruption. The log was buried, locked under security clearance. The event was never added to the official records, but some of them dreamed of blue lights and woke weeping. The wasteland moved on. The seasons shifted. Raiders rose and fell. Machines awakened, vaults cracked, steel rusted. Yet somewhere in the air, beneath the buzz of old frequencies, those who knew how to listen could still catch them. Whispers in static, soft tones in wind, memories long thought buried. A song sung by a lost soldier, a confession whispered through a Pip-Boy, a promise not to forget. In the end, the Ash Heap held no treasure, no grand technology to conquer the world, only a truth too long hidden, that in the fight between control and compassion, victory wasn't found in dominance. It was found in choosing not to be alone. And that was enough. That was everything.